Hi, I'm Ariana, and I'm with Fresh Pair of Eyes. How are you?
Hi.
Awesome. So, do you remember where you were when Hurricane Katrina hit and how you were feeling?
Yeah, I was home. I was in Brooklyn. That's where I grew up. And I was watching everything unfold on my TV. And I was shocked and I didn't understand what I was seeing. I didn't understand how this can happen in a place like America, um, especially having knowing friends who were from there. It just was shocking.
For sure. And what made you join this project? You had previously worked with John Ridley before for 12 Years a Slave. So, what attracted you to this project of his, and how was it like working with him again?
It was great because the actors that were assembled, that right there in and of itself was just incredible. And then with John, I was getting to work with him in this capacity as a director, a writer, producer, whereas in 12 years as a screenwriter. So I didn't have any interactions with him as a screenwriter then. But here I got to work with him and just to see just the level and the depths of his talent and his care in terms of storytelling, but also of actors and crew. That was pretty amazing.
For sure. And what would you say is your character's Karen's mindset while in the hospital? Because everyone's kind of having a different reaction and approach to the storm. What would you say is your character's mindset during the storm?
She just needs to get things done. There are people who need to be taking care of her staff, her patients. And that's the most important thing. There's no time to wallow in my exhaustion, in the heat. I have a job to do, and it's to care for these people and to make them as comfortable as possible so that we all can get home.
For sure. And your character has an interaction with Cornelius Smith Jr.'s character, Dr. Bryant, where he's kind of bringing up the whole race thing and how we're not letting other people in. And your character seems like, well, I'm in charge of taking care of the people who are here at this very moment, and I need to focus on that. I feel like she's kind of very driven to what she's seeing in front of her to honestly maybe also protect her mental health at that moment as well.
I agree. I agree. I think there's a myriad of reasons why you focus on what you focus. I think for protection, because if you allow yourself to go one way or another, you're not going to be able to do your job, and you're already tired. You're already not with your family, but also it's you have a job to do, and as a nurse in particular, you don't necessarily have the luxury to see things in a way that doctors might see things. You're really interacting with patients. You're used to interacting with patients on a deeper, longer level. So at the end of the day, it's like I just have to focus. I just have to focus on my people, which is her patients and her staff.
How did you prepare for this role?
I read the book that the series is based on, and it's a wealth of information in terms of a real comprehensive gathering of information in terms of like the history of the hospital, the characters involved, the city itself. And I also got to talk with Sheri Fink, who wrote the book. She was a wealth of knowledge. She's also a doctor too, so that was great.
And when preparing for the role and shooting it, what was the most surprising thing that you found out about Katrina that you didn't know as someone who was experiencing it in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I think just the levels in which people were abandoned, like how the system, government, corporate, local government, just the breakdown of all of that led to what happened at Memorial. I wasn't even thinking about that. I couldn't think about that, but just to see that unfold, it was pretty, it makes you angry.
And what was the most challenging scene to shoot for yourself during this role?
Oh, that's a great question. I think scenes in which where I'm having to battle my emotions at what I'm seeing and then having to kind of switch into like, okay, we've got to get this done. I have to take care of, it's, which I imagine in real life it's the same way. Like, how are you balancing those two sides of yourself, the emotional human side, but also the side of you that you have a job to do. And those were challenging for me.
For sure. So I had talked to some of the other actors about this, that Katrina happened 17 years ago, and we're seeing how many balls were dropped and how many people frankly just didn't care. But even though that happened 17 years ago, we're seeing definitely echoes of this with how COVID has been happening, especially with people of color, and even the Uvalde shooting. How was it like to shoot this project that's set in the past, but things frankly haven't really changed that much?
I think it makes you want to tell those stories because it's still relevant. We're still in it. I think John Ridley, he said it so beautifully on our first meetings, is that history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes, and it's like, and we talk about that all the time, but it still happens. And so these stories need to still be told because they're either forgotten or people don't want to talk about it, but they need to be spoken about so that in some way, shape, or form, if we can create some kind of change, whether small, that's something. And so it's important to tell these stories.
For sure. And while watching it, the show definitely shifts because the first episodes are the 5 days. And then when they're removed from the storm, they're kind of seeing many of the holes within the story and even some of the doctor's decisions in that moment. What do you want people to take away from the show?
I think basically to just take in what they're experiencing and talk about how they're feeling, what their feelings are about what they perceive to happen. And it might differ depending on who you're talking to, but just to have the conversation. Because I think a lot of times when we're not having the conversation, it's easy for things to kind of be swept under the rug and we forget that these things happen. And you can get to a point of 17 years later and people never ever either, they had never heard of the story or they forgot about it just because, life happens. And so we need to talk about these things because these things were lived by real people who to this day are still dealing with the effects of what happened then.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, and best of luck with this project and future projects.
Thank you.